Brian Lehrer on WNYC, and here's a brief story of one New Yorker who made history on Election Day, but is not getting very much media attention. She is Catalina Cruz, now elected to the New York State Legislature, the Assembly, from the Corona, Elmhurst, Jackson Heights area of Queens. Her election is historic because, born in Colombia in 1983, she is the first formerly undocumented immigrant elected to office in New York who would have been covered by the DREAM Act if it had passed Congress. That is, she was someone who came of age as an American in this era without legal immigration status after being brought here as a child. Here is 45 seconds of a campaign video for Cruz with a little bit of her story.
When I was 9 years old, my mom brought me from Colombia with just one dream: to give her daughter a better life. So she did the most courageous thing that a young single mother could do: uproot our lives and move to Queens. We've never looked back. I am a dreamer. I am the child of an undocumented worker who brought me here to achieve the American dream. I am the daughter of a woman who struggled to make a living passing out flyers on Roosevelt Avenue, and who suffered the indignity of wage theft as a domestic worker. Every corner in Corona, Elmhurst, and Jackson Heights has a story like mine.
Part of a campaign video for Catalina Cruz, formerly an undocumented immigrant, now a U.S. citizen, and now elected to the New York State Assembly on Tuesday. Cruz is one example of immigrants who got elected this week, even as the president focused on national Republican messages squarely around fearing immigrants as the main reason to vote GOP. In our polarized country right now, both trends seem to define who we are in 2018. I learned about Catalina Cruz from my next guest, Sayu Bhojwani, who was New York City's first Immigrant Affairs Commissioner when that position was created under Mayor Michael Bloomberg. With a doctorate from Columbia and a visiting professorship at Rutgers, these days Dr. Bhojwani is the founder and president of a group called New American Leaders, which helps prepare immigrant leaders, including Catalina Cruz, to run for office. And Sayu Bhojwani has a new book called People Like Us, The New Waves of Candidates Knocking on Democracy's Door. Thanks so much for joining us. Welcome back to WNYC.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for having me.
What does Queens Assemblywoman-elect Catalina Cruz represent to you in the context of this week's election?
Well, that was great. Thank you for sharing that video, because I found myself being moved to tears and wondering why it is that we wouldn't want to welcome everyone like Catalina to our country. What she represents, I think, is for our organization, something that we have believed in for the last 8 years, is the power of candidates like her who share stories and lived experiences with their constituents. What does it mean to mobilize these voters when they can see someone who will be their advocate and who understands their lived experiences? And I think although she will be one in the New York State Assembly in terms of being formerly undocumented, that one represents so many possibilities to the dreamers who are currently trying to figure out whether they'll be able to stay in America.
Do you know in her case, as a dreamer, meaning undocumented as a kid, how she became a citizen?
I believe it was through marriage.
And what issues do you think she'll bring to Albany because of her life experience?
Well, I think, first of all, she's a housing attorney. And so she has experience not just on immigration issues, but she's worked in the city council and understands the range of issues that New York City residents face in trying to access the opportunity in our city. So I think it's going to be housing. I think it's going to be, equitable wages. I think it's going to be definitely immigration. And it's particularly important right now that in New York, we fight back with state and local policy in the face of immigration reform being completely absent as a conversation.
In fact, one of the things that you probably know has been bottled up in the state legislature is what they call the New York DREAM Act.
Right.
Because the Republican-controlled state Senate wouldn't pass it. Now the Democrats have won control of the state Senate, so we'll see if the New York DREAM Act now goes forward as a significant thing. How did you work with Catalina Cruz? If she was one of your clients, what kind of consultant consulting did you do with her, and how is it emblematic of something that goes beyond her story and her Queens district?
Well, so I should just clarify that we worked with Catalina when she had already declared, but that our program is a C3. So we support people. We don't support people while they're running.
A non-political
Nonpartisan,
organization,
yes.
a C3.
Yes. And what we worked with Catalina on is what we work with all these passionate, community-driven advocates and candidates on, which is how do you show up as you are, telling your story authentically in a way to connect to voters through values. It's not that the voters want to know the details of your policy as much as how are you going to advocate on their behalf, right? The second thing that we work with Catalina and other candidates on is how to expand the electorate. And that is a conversation that you've been hearing a lot about in the 2018 election cycle, right?
A lot about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The people who never get talked to by candidates or parties.
And with potential turnout for Hillary Clinton lower than it might have been among potential Democratic voters, that was a big thing in 2016, so that became a big emphasis for 2018. Among Latinos, in the Wall Street Journal exit poll stat that I read earlier in the show, only 9% of the electorate nationwide was Latino, which is only about half of the Latino share of the population in this country.
Yep.
So still underrepresented, and that's why this kind of candidate who can relate to more people who may not identify enough with other kinds of candidates, one reason that matters.
Yeah, and one of the things that if you dive down into that 9% who did turn out, the majority of Latino voters tend to be contacted not by political parties, but by candidates as well as grassroots organizations. I mean, this turnout that we've been hearing about in this cycle is largely motivated by mobilized by grassroots organizations and candidates.